I think number one is getting the supply of affordable housing up. I think that there are actually not, I think, I know that there are many jurisdictions, cities, municipalities that love the idea of affordable housing and are not supportive of builders building affordable housing in their neighborhood. And so I think you receive a supply constraint because of that reluctance. And that shows in not getting permits and not making these permits in such a way so that it makes sense to the developer. Because the developer needs to make money too, and everyone who comes along with it. And if you're going to impose onerous permits and processes and bureaucracies on this type of process, then people will not be incentivized to increase the supply. So that's number one. I think number two is, and again, this is something that I've experienced as well, is the reluctance of landlords to rent out to Section 8 tenants. It usually comes with increased maintenance. They don't treat the home well or as their own. And if they are responsible for a portion of the rent payment, sometimes they are delinquent. And so I think those are some of the reasons that make it challenging for some landlords to really be motivated to rent out to Section 8 tenants. I think it's an issue that still persists and is not helped by a lot of times the housing authorities not willing to pay market rent.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Today, I got my friend on here from Southern California, Stephen Yin. He actually works in private equity as a full-time job, and he loves it. But he also still has a side gig as a real estate investor. So today, we're bringing him on. We're going to talk about how he's been so successful investing in real estate in his home state of Alabama. So, Stephen, welcome to the show, man. How you doing, bro?
Hey, Kent, I'm doing well. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, man, dude. I when I first heard about you and I heard you were investing in Alabama, I was like, oh, you're one of the first guys I know that's investing there, and you happen to be from
Yeah,
there at the same time and be from
that's
there.
right.
So I
That's right.
always love learning about new markets and especially markets that I'm not particularly familiar with. So why don't you just give us a
Okay.
little bit about some information about your background and how you even got into real estate investing in affordable housing?
Sure, happy to. And thanks for taking the time to speak with me. So I grew up mostly in Birmingham, Alabama. My family was born in China and then moved here when I was about 6 years old. We lived in Atlanta for a couple of years before moving to Birmingham. I believe this was in 2004. So I spent the majority of my childhood there. And my parents still live there. My younger sister is finishing up high school there. So I do have a lot of strong family connections to the area. I think that for me, I've worked in finance since I graduated from college. And the way that I guess, started in real estate investing was actually when COVID first started. I went home for about 3 months and I was working from home and I had some extra time. At the same time, one of my very good friends from college asked me out of the blue one day, have you ever considered buying up a rental property in Alabama? And I said, no. But uh, but if you're serious about it, I can schedule some walkthroughs via Zillow. And so he was serious about it, and we wanted to do something that was affordable for us, but that also would cash flow quite nicely. And I think we must have toured, or I toured on behalf of us, gosh, 10, 15 properties. And we settled on one. It was competitive. We The ask was for this 3 bed 1 bath in a lower income part of the city. It was, I believe, $54,000, and we negotiated it down to 48, and that was our first house. And we've since changed partners. One of my current partners bought him out when he wanted to liquidate. So we sold the house. It, believe it or not, has cash flowed every month. There is minimal maintenance. The tenant always pays on time, as does, of course, the housing authority, which issues the Section 8 voucher. And it's been a great investment for the past, I would say, almost 3 years. I want to caveat that by saying it's not the case with every single property, especially in affordable housing, because there are issues that come up, whether it's maintenance, getting the getting the house certified by the local housing authority, and of course, issues that come up out of the blue, whether it's ADA access, HVAC breaking, mold, or anything else that can happen, but that you don't think will happen. It's going to happen. So,
Dude, all
affordable
right, hold
housing is
on.
not for the faint of heart.
Props to you first for talking to your friend about a business. Because how many times, I don't know where listeners' experiences are, but sometimes we're always at the bar and we're talking with friends and everyone always has a crazy business idea, but it
Right.
usually never goes anywhere.
Right.
You actually took that idea and said, all right, let's actually go explore this. You took action right away. You
Right.
found 10 to 15 properties you toured, and then you also negotiated down your first property as a newbie. Like, wow, dude. Like, sometimes people just like, okay, this is the listed price, like, let me just go for it. But let me pause here, and because
Right.
everybody always asking this question, how
Yep.
did you negotiate your first partnership with the deal? Because you already had a partner for the first deal, and then you also had another partner to bottom out. People always ask about, like, how do you structure it, those type of
Yeah.
transactions. So can you give us some examples of, like, tactically, how did you structure that? And,
Sure.
obviously, how did you guys end that partnership amicably?
Sure. Yeah. So, just to be clear, my first partner and I are very, very good friends. I went to his wedding last year. The reason why he wanted to liquidate is because he and his wife were moving to Europe, and so they wanted to move a lot of their assets from the U.S. To a state where it was more liquid, which made sense to me. So the way that we structured that partnership, as well as my existing one, is um, we just started literally an LLC. We structured it as a partnership where each person, each party, me and him, would be accountable for 50% of the expenses, and also can enjoy the benefits of 50% of the revenue. So it was a very simple, clean structure. And we literally went onto the Alabama Secretary of State website and filled out a form in 20 minutes, paid the registration fee, and then we got a certificate. And then we went onto the IRS website, auto generated our EIN number, and then we found a registered agent where it's a $49 annual subscription fee to be our registered agent. And then we were in business. That was it. And then to answer your other question, how do we make that transfer where my first partner got bought up by the second partner? It was a cash transaction where one LLC sold the house to another LLC. That was basically it. It was as clean and simple as you can get in terms of transferring someone's equity interest to someone else. If it were more involved, like if there were three people and there was unequal ownership stakes, then we may have had to perhaps hire outside counsel to help us determine what the optimal structure is. But for this particular purpose, it was quite simple.
Oh, that's so cool, man. And I think you just made it sound so simple for so many people, where
Well, the
everybody
thing,
overthinks it,
yeah,
overcomplicates it.
yeah. The thing is, and this goes to one of your questions of what are some of the tactics that you want to keep in mind as you build your portfolio. You want to make sure that you have a great um, closing agent. I've worked with numerous different closing agents in the past, and they've ranged from being great to being not so great. And I think the key difference is making sure that they can get you an accurate closing document a day or two before you actually close. So that's something I always ask for, and the closing agent we work with knows this. Is 2 days before I'll say, "Can you send me a draft version so I can tick and tie the numbers?" And oftentimes I'll find something that's wrong, and I'll say, "Hey, per the purchase agreement, Section 8, Clause 2, I'm supposed to be getting this credit," or something like that. So it's really about paying attention to detail and making sure that the day of closing is two things should happen on the day of closing. Number one, you wire the amount to the bank. Number two, you sign the closing documents either in person or via Zoom or in front of someone, and that you can close successfully. You should not be negotiating what is on the closing document on the day of close. That creates a lot of unnecessary stress, and it's really important to just keep that in mind. The other thing I would also add, and again, this is something that I've learned because I've
Mm-hmm.
made a mistake, and is
Yep.
always sign in blue ink, no matter what.
Oh,
Always sign in blue ink.
smart.
And number two, if you're going to do a remote, so all my closings have been done remotely because I'm not physically at the office of the
Mm-hmm.
closing agent, which is a law firm in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm not there
Mm-hmm.
when I close the house, so I always let it let them know well ahead of time. Hey, this is going to be a remote closing, and you can do it in one of two ways. Number one is you can go to a local notary and sign the records of documents in front of them, and they give they notarize the documents, and then you overnight the original versions back to the closing agent. That's the first method. And by the way, be sure to scan a copy for yourself for record keeping before you mail it. So that's the first method. The second method, you can actually ask the closing attorney to watch you sign the documents over Zoom. And that actually will save you notary fees. And what
Hot tip. I love that.
each state is different, but basically they record, that session. They need to keep it on record for X number of years. But if you ask,
Mm-hmm.
make sure that your lender, if there's a lender involved, approves this in writing. My lender is very good and he's understanding, so he says approve pretty quickly. But you can close over Zoom with a closing attorney and save $150 on
Wow.
notary and shipping and printing fees. So,
And
anyways,
that's
let me
so
pause.
important.
It's very important
Like
because
that's
sometimes unfortunately you'll have some closing attorneys who may not be familiar depending on what kind of transaction or what kind of structure that you are doing, and so it's just very important that they know everything up front, and that your mentality going in, because again, you're driving the process, right? You're putting down the down you're putting the down payment on the house. You are in charge of coordinating the inspection. You're in charge of getting the financing, and ultimately you're in charge of making sure that your ducks are all in a row when you are in the closing process. So it's your responsibility to have that. Hey guys, 2 weeks away from close, what documents do you need from me to make your life easier? And that goes for every party involved: insurance, the seller, your agent, the lender, the closing attorney, the inspectors. It's your responsibility as the future equity owner of this property to be driving that process. And that's something I learned from my day job, is that you can't rely on your agent to check in and say, hey, where are we on insurance? Have we gotten the insurance policy down? That's your job. So let me pause there.
Dude, I love that you are encouraging people to take ownership, because so many times people just go into transactions expecting things would just get done and it would just magically happen without any sort of
Yeah,
oversight. I'm not saying that can't happen, but in general, especially if you have investors or partners, you should take ownership of that process. And I love that you literally went through every single step so that you made sure people understand, like, hey, this is all the stuff that you've been through yourself, Stephen, and
right.
everybody else should kind of pay attention to, not only just from the process standpoint, but you even point out little things like I didn't know about. Like, I didn't know you could close over a Zoom with an attorney
Yeah,
watching. Like, that is so clever and that's so innovative. And saving $150, that's like almost sometimes a whole month's worth of cash flow, guys. Like
that's right.
that's real bottom line money. You
Or
guys have to be
or it's like
smart.
15 15 Chipotle bowls without the guac. I actually think a lot about the cost of things in terms of Chipotle bowls, which
Food.
is ironic because I love Chipotle, but I don't really eat out much. I usually cook at home, but I love Chipotle nonetheless.
Dude, we're gonna get some Chipotle for lunch. So let's maybe transition this to affordable housing.
Sure.
One is your first home was affordable housing. How
Yes.
did you even know about Section 8 affordable housing? Like, how did you decide, like, hey, for my first rental, we're gonna go the affordable housing route? What
Right.
was that thought process behind it? And
Yep.
how difficult was it going through that process of inspections, getting the
Mhm.
tenants, et cetera, the first time?
Sure. No, great questions. Let me try to answer them in the order you asked. So number one is why did this is did I know about Section 8? And the answer is no. I had no idea. I had to listen to a couple of podcasts on bigger pockets to familiarize myself and do my own research before really understanding how HUD funds the Section 8 voucher program for each housing authority, which of course is very localized. So that I had to do my own research on that front. Number two is how to decide on perhaps this particular house. Is at the time something that people won't tell you is very few lenders will lend to you if the purchase price of your house is under a certain amount. Some lenders who are more
Mm,
conservative may put a $75,000 price minimum. A lot of lenders will say, "I'm not going to go anything under 50K." And so when my partner and I purchased this first property at $40,000, we were going to purchase in cash. So we wanted something that could definitely cash flow and that would not be a huge drain on our liquidity. So that was the thought process there. We were not gonna, and also we had no idea how to take out a loan. Um, and so even if we found something that was, for example, maybe 100K that had higher rent, we just didn't know. We just had no idea. And then we, of course, you learn as you go. But at the time, we just didn't know. So that was the second thing. The third thing was we actually found the tenant uh, inside the property. So what that means is when we purchased the property, there's already a tenant living there. And so
mm,
that begs the question, well, Stephen, how can you filter that so that when you look for houses, you can distinguish between houses that already have tenants and houses that do not have tenants? And really, the simple thing is on Zillow or Redfin, you go to advanced search and in the specific keywords, just type Section 8. And usually, and the reason why is because when realtors list properties with a Section 8 tenant, they will usually say Section 8 tenant living here at X dollars of rent per month. And so that it's a simple filter for you to find. If you don't want to find tenants yourself and you want to buy a property with a tenant already living there, that's a simple way to do that. Um, And I think those are most of the questions that you asked, but let me know if I missed anything.
yeah. So you found this. So it sounds like the Section 8 tenant was already living at this first property you bought. Did I catch that
Yes.
correctly?
Oh, and you asked about inspection and whatnot. So I asked my agent, "Hey, do you know any general inspectors who are good?" So I think it's pretty standard to ask for uh, for a period of 10 days after you execute the purchase agreement to give yourself time to do the inspection. At the time, We only did, a general walkthrough inspection, and then we looked at the report, and then we went from there. Now, what I do for every close is I do the general inspection, I do an electrical inspection, I do a roof inspection, and I do a sewer inspection. The sewer inspection is very important, and you and I talked about this briefly last week, because if you have a sewer issue, it is a time sensitive and expensive thing that needs to be fixed. So if you're buying an old house, which usually is what a lot of affordable houses are, oftentimes they'll have, or they may have, lead pipes. Okay, if you want to replace lead pipes, it's a whole process. You have to get a city permit from the city to dig up dirt and then replace
Mm-hmm.
lead pipes with PVC pipes. That's a very expensive process. And the thing is, you're not going to know unless you get a specialty inspector there to put his camera, you know, down the toilet
And just go,
and
yep.
understand what the condition of the piping is. So, anyways, that's the inspection portion. And then as for the rent, that was already something that was negotiated by the housing authority. I will say, and we can discuss this in detail later. One of the things to consider for affordable housing is, while you will experience very low to no delinquency risk from Section 8, you may experience challenges with having the housing authority pay rent at market value. And even if you follow their procedures in terms of asking for a rent increase, they may change the rules without telling you and deny your rent increase. So, as an example, this property currently rents at about $775 a month. Not bad. The market rent is about $925. And we want to say we, I mean, my property manager and I, we followed the procedures that Birmingham Housing Authority laid out to increase or to ask for a rent increase. And then because of one small technicality, they denied it. And so I told my property manager, hey, this time, January 2023 is when we should go back to, or when we can go back to Section 8 and ask for a price increase. Let's ask for this the week after Thanksgiving. And I put a calendar invite along with her to remind ourselves, hey, Monday after Thanksgiving, we're going to the housing authority and we're asking for a market rent increase. So it's important to stay on top of things.
Now, was that technicality because of timing? Because you missed a deadline, like it has to be within 60 or 120 days, whatever that.
Oh, we made a 60-day timeline. It was something about how it's actually based on another date, so that it was within 30 days as opposed to 60 days. I'll need to check back on the email chain to tell you the exact reason, but the point is, each housing authority is very different. They have their own rules and they have their own idiosyncrasies. And oftentimes it can be not difficult, that's not the right word. It can be challenging to work with them, especially for organizations that are understaffed. So it's very important to be ahead of the game and to take whatever rules and regulations they have, and then to bake in even more conservatism and say, okay, they said 60 days, let's do 90 days internally. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think that helps. Like, once for the listeners out there, right? Once you pick your market and you understand exactly what those procedures and processes are for local housing authority, you also have to understand, like, everybody, like, they heard about. It's so hard to hire people, right? That goes for every single type of business, and also for the housing authorities too. You have to, you cannot procrastinate. And it's on you as the investor, securing your investors' money to fight for the maximum amount of rent in the scenario. So you should definitely take Steven's advice, get ahead of the game, so that if there were anything that was missed in the process for like a rent increase, like you can kind of get ahead of that and give yourself some cushion, so you're not kind of just out of luck for the whole year for 12 months before you can get to the next lease or the rent increase. But Steven, you've got some tenants in there. Do you have like one of the things we want to do here is like inspire other people to kind of get involved in affordable
Mhm.
housing. Do you have any stories of people you've been able to help via affordable housing with your tenants there?
Yeah. One of the other properties that I have, it's another three bed, one bath. Um, I got this for, I think, $44,000 2 years ago. Um, and the tenant was obviously Section 8. And she recently had a medical procedure where, uh, where one of her limbs was amputated. And so I made the house ADA friendly, so she could maneuver around the house relatively easily.
Wow. That's so great, man. You literally changed her life and made her life so much easier by going above and beyond, right?
Yeah,
And I'm sure she's probably won't be moving out anytime soon because you have gone above and beyond being a great landlord there in that relationship.
I thank you. I think there are a limited number of houses in Birmingham that are ADA friendly, based on the neighborhoods that she would want to live in.
Yeah, and I think, but this is just such a good example of like you being able to help out somebody, and you really are changing her life for the better by becoming. Not only is it good for your business, quote unquote, because your vacancy expense is going to be very, very low now, but you have
Right.
actually made a really, really big impact on her. And I think that's so cool, man. Thank you for sharing that story, dude.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's so inspirational. And it just speaks to the type of person that you are. I love it. So let's kind of go into, that was one of the cool things that you were able to do. But like you and I talked about, we always want to surface the problems that you can kind of come into, right?
Sure.
You talked about
Mhm.
the sewage problems that cost you a lot of money, but what about when you are buying properties and, with or without an existing tenant in place, what
Yep.
have you found to be sort of, I guess that we're looking for advice that you would give to the
Mhm.
listeners right now. Like what kind of red flags or issues do you think there are associated with buying a property with a tenant in place versus not having one? Like what has been your experience with that matter?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think some of the challenges with buying a property with a tenant in place would be you're not knowing how um, how on time they will be in terms of future payments. Of course, you can ask for the rent roll, and I think that's helpful to a certain extent. But you're just not going to know. And there have been there have been houses I've purchased where you have a tenant who's been living there for several years, and 6 months after you purchase, they give you notice and they say, "Hey, I'm going to leave." And so I think it's important when you evaluate and underwrite different properties that if you're going to buy a property with a tenant who's already there, assume that there is a decent chance of them moving out, even if they tell you that they won't move out. Um, and just bake in the costs of the rehab and the vacancy that you would undergo. Um, Now, to answer the other part of your question, some of the challenges with buying just a home without a tenant, I think it's very important uh, uh, to understand the neighborhood demographics and to better understand what kind of tenant you want to attract. Obviously, a Class A neighborhood is going to be very different from a Class C or D neighborhood in terms of how much rent you can have, expenses, type of tenant, longevity of the tenant, all those factors. So I think it's going to be very important for you to understand what your rent potential is, as well as what that future upside looks like. There are some neighborhoods where the rent has remained the same for the past several years, and there are some where the rent has exploded. So I think you should underwrite in such a way that you should not assume any rent increase to be to be conservative with your estimates. But I think it's important to just have that in your mind of how much more rent you can get on an annual basis. I would say that in terms of general things to watch out for, regardless if the house is a tenant or not, you want to understand how much maintenance was done over the past 12 to 24 months. You want to understand the age of the HVAC. You want to understand when the roof was replaced. You want to understand if there's been any water or mold issues, which can be detrimental to the property and very expensive for you. And you want to understand, um, you want to, yeah, I think those are some of the main key areas that come to mind for me in terms of diligencing the property during the closing process. Something to keep in mind also is obviously you won't be able to understand and know these facts until after your inspector completes the report. So oftentimes what I would do is I read the report, I comb through it in detail, I walk through it with my inspector and have him, it's usually him, give me a qualitative assessment. And then I ask him, of the properties that you have inspected, where does this fall from a range from a range of 1 to 10? One being this is
Great
pristine,
one.
turnkey, you can move in yourself, to 10 being this house needs to be demolished. Where does that fall? Just to get a better feel for um, what that looks like. And then if I discover issues such as, oh, there are holes on the roof, which means I need to replace them with I need to replace the shingles, which is going to be expensive. I would go back to the seller through my agent, and I would say, hey, this is an issue that I found, and a rough estimate of the cost is, 10 grand or whatever the amount is. I like either number one, for that to be baked into the purchase price, or number two, to have you fix it beforehand. And by the way, that's happened before where I would find an issue and I would have someone fix it beforehand. You typically want to lower the purchase price. Um, why is that? Number one, you have greater control over you fixing it. Sometimes people will do a shoddy job of fixing with their GCs and then call it a day. So you want to
Mm-hmm.
that's part of your QA/QC process. Number two, by lowering the purchase price instead of having them fix it, you put less money in, and the amount of debt you have to take out is less, which means your overall cost basis is less. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and you get lower property taxes at the same time.
Yep.
And it's
Yep.
like, guys, for the people listening, you have to get creative on how you make something a deal, and you got to consider all elements of it, right? It's by lowering the purchase price, lower debt, lower interest,
Right.
and at the same time, you get lower property taxes. That all affects your monthly cash flow, and it's about how much you can squeeze out into the bottom line there. So that's all great advice, man. And again, like one of the things we always talk about is like, hey, what type of
Mhm.
horror stories do you have that you can kind of share
Yeah.
with us about
Sure.
your real estate investment careers, particularly with tenants? Because you and I talked about the stigma with Section 8 or
Yep.
affordable housing is that it's always gangs, drugs, drama. What type of issues have you run into it, and how have you
Mhm.
dealt with those issues?
Sure. So I'll tell you one that I'm dealing with live right now. This was a 2 bed, 1 bath property that I own. We got it. A partner and I got it for very cheaply. And there was a tenant there. Um, she vacated the property. I would say last September. We put in about 6 grand of rehab and renovation to make the property rent ready. We rented it out to another tenant who had been paying um, uh, rent on a pretty consistent basis. And when he had a steady job, he had a pretty clean track record of paying on time. And I think around Christmas time, he asked for he put in a request saying that his heater wasn't working. And mind you, this house is a 2 bed, 1 bath. There's 2 window units as opposed to central AC. So we got someone out there. AC heater was working just fine, and we charged him for the trip uh, because the AC was functioning properly. He um, refused to pay for the trip charge, and then just stopped paying rent. And then he just vacated the property. So now the property is vacant. And last week we just found that both of the window units were missing, as well as the bathroom vanity.
Oh,
And there was no sign of a break in. And so our best guess is that this tenant took both of the window units and the bathroom vanity with him as he vacated the property.
oh my
And
God.
and on top of that, as opposed to going to us and understanding some of the issues that he was having so that we could help resolve them, he went to the city of Birmingham, and the city of Birmingham issued us a notice saying that the house was not up to code. Now, that's actually not as big of a deal as it sounds like. Basically, what you need to do is you need to get a specific scope of work from the city: electrical, plumbing, heating, etc., and make sure that you exactly finish that scope of work and have them certify it. So it's not as big of a deal as it seems, but it basically means that this property is not worthy of someone living there. But that was also an area of frustration where basically now we need to um, replace both window units, replace the bathroom vanity, spend some money to get the house up to code, and then look for another tenant.
Wow, man, that can be frustrating. And was this a Section 8 tenant as well?
No,
Oh, there you
the
go.
gentleman was in, ironically, law enforcement.
Oh man, that's kind of crazy though. Like, but these are issues that newbies, you guys will probably run into someday. If you are truly engaged in real estate investing, like everybody says, it's only a matter of time, when you do an eviction, right? And you will run into issues like this. But in this case, Steven said, hey, look, this is what happened. Someone stole my AC unit, someone stole my vanities. And all of a sudden, the building department says it's no longer habitable. But at this same time, it's just about, hey, just keep problem solving it. When problems come up,
Right.
just look for how to solve it. And in this
Yep.
scenario, you just got to scope of work and you just got to kind of just check the box off the checklist and then
Right.
time to kind of move on. So that's why it's something that I love that you shared this, because people always think about, like, well, what if something goes wrong? What if someone robs my apartment? Well, this just happened to Steven. And guess what? He bounced right back from it and he's still
Right.
alive, right? It's not life or death situation. So by removing that fear, I think you just kind of encourage a lot of people to think about, like, hey, if X and X happens, I can just kind of come back to this interview where Kent talked to Steven about that situation. And now I know exactly what to happen. And I no longer need to be scared of it. So thank you, dude, for sharing that advice, man. That's awesome.
And I would say, and by the way, I would say two things to sort of add on, Ken. Number one is assuming that you work with a property manager. I think it's important and helpful to check in with a property manager on these kinds of longer term work streams. So I laid out in a very clear email to my property manager. I said, these are the houses that are experiencing issues. Here's the scope of work. Here's a timeline. And here's a path to resolving these issues. And it's important to check in with them maybe not every day. That's excessive, but that's draconian. But it's important to check in with them maybe once every week or 2 weeks. Hey, where are we on this rehab? Where are we on finding the next tenant? Where are we on making this fix? Those kinds of things are going to be important and helpful for you as the landlord and as the equity holder of the house. Number two is a lot of times some of these fixes can be quite expensive, several grand, as I'm sure you probably have experience, Ken. So it's important. It's important for your cash flow to negotiate a payment plan with the contractor. So as an example, one of my properties experienced a sewer issue where essentially the tenant cannot use the bathroom. So that's a serious, time sensitive, must fix issue. The total cost of that was, $7 grand, I think. Okay, well, I didn't want to just put in $7,000 at once. That just didn't make sense to me from a cash flow perspective. So I directly called the inspector, or sorry, the sewage company, and I said, "Hey, I want to work with you guys. I want to give you guys this piece of business. Um, but this is not helpful for me. So let's talk about what a payment plan looks like, and I'm happy to sign whatever documentation you need me to sign to put a lien on the house in case I am delinquent in my payments." So we negotiated. Basically, I said, if you will let me pay um, this over 6 months, I'm willing to pay you a grand total of $7,300 in 6 months, in six equal increments, starting on this date. And so we negotiated that. We agreed to it. I actually put a recurring counter invite and I put the sewer company's rep on there. Basically, on the 15th of every month, pay X amount to Pickle Plumbing, and that's a way for me to show them that I'm being intentional and that I'm being accountable to them, because you want to be a good partner as you develop your own network. Now, here's the not the funny part, but here's the part that I realized. I got in touch with that contractor through my property manager, and for all the listeners out there, it's standard practice for your property manager to charge a 10% fee on top of whatever maintenance fixes they have. I asked the sewage inspector, I asked Pickle Plumbing to invoice me directly, as opposed to going through the property manager. If I had gone through the property manager, number one, it would have been 10% on top of 7K, which gets you to 7,700. And number two, I wouldn't have been able to pay over 6 months in 6 month in installments. So by actually going directly to the contractor, I was able to pay in installments, and my total cost is $7,300 as opposed to $7,700. So net, I saved $400, and I got a better payment plan.
Dude, you are someone that I need to invest with. Like, come on, guys. Like, you got to be so creative with these things, because if you had just rolled over and just accepted, like, okay, this is the cost. Property manager got me a bid, $7,700. Like, that's a lot of cash out of pocket. So not only did you get creative, you said, hey, let me pay you over payment so the cash flow takes care of it. So now for all the people out there, like, hey, I'm so scared of, what if the sewage needs repairing or something like that, and I need to come out with $7,000 out of pocket. I can't come up with that money out of pocket. So they never get started with investing. Like, you can negotiate not only on a purchase price, but you can negotiate on terms, and you can present it in such a way that the contractor is actually making more money at the end of the day after interest, especially if they don't need the cash right away.
Exactly.
And you save money by going around the property manager, but like, you got creative with just how you engaged the contractors, because it was such a big job that you probably needed some oversight onto something like that. So absolutely love it.
And I would also say, just this is more, high level more of a principle than a tactic. Putting aside ethics and morals, and of course, being compliant with state, local, federal law, everything is up for negotiation. Everything. Purchase price, who pays for what, insurance, inspection, property management fees, attorney fees, professional services fees. Everything is up for negotiation. It is your responsibility as again, we can say landlord. I like saying equity owner, because it implies ownership. It is your job to negotiate aggressively. So, for example, there was a duplex that I got off market about a year and a half ago, and the seller was a very, very old woman who had held the property for close to 40 years and just wanted to liquidate. And so she was a motivated seller. She wanted execution, she wanted closing certainty, and she wanted speed. Um, and I said, fine, you're asking 85, 90K for this house, and you want these three things. We're going to dial it down to, I asked for 60K. So I asked for a 30% reduction. And we ended up at 65K. But the thing is, depending on what the seller wants and what you want, everything is up for negotiation. And if they want, for example, speed, certain to close, a very good counterparty to transact with, guess what? You need to pay for that. You need to pay for that.
Absolutely, man. And this might be a good time to transition. Like, let's actually talk about numbers, right? So we talked about you can do good with affordable housing, you can negotiate. Can you share one or two deals that you've done? Like, what did you buy it for? What did you renovate it for? And what kind of rents you're charging for, and how much cash flow you're generating from those deals?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Let me actually on a separate screen. Let me just pull up that. I know that this is going to audio, so let me just read out some of the numbers as we go along.
Yeah, love it.
So let's talk about this duplex in particular. So this duplex, it's call it 3,000 square feet total, so 1,500 per unit. I was able to get this at $65,000 as I stated beforehand. I knew going in that I would have to put in some work because there was some I would call deferred maintenance on this property. I was able to get a loan from Chase. That, mind you, this is in the era of low interest rates. I got a 30-year fixed at 3.5%, 25% down payment, and so then people may ask, okay, that's great. What does that come out to from a monthly mortgage number perspective? That number is, using round numbers, 220. Okay. 220 a month for a duplex. I've rented it out at total $1,600 in gross rent a month. Okay. So the delta is quite large there. Now, of course, I had to put in some more equity to fix the houses. So I put in about, let's just call it 10K of work. So, okay. So then that means my cost basis is 65K purchase price plus 10K of the rehab that I've done. I'm at 75K. So then going back to the monthly expenses, you have 1,600 of gross rent. My property manager actually takes 8% of that, but let's just assume 10%. So 10% of 1,600 is 160. So 1,600 minus 160 gets you to 1,440, right? There's going to be some maintenance that's going to come up. So let's just bake in, I don't know, $200 of maintenance. Okay, so 1,440 minus 200, you're at 1,240. And then you have 220 of your monthly mortgage, right? So 1,240 minus 220, that gets you $1,040. We'll just say $1,000, but that's $1,000 of net of really free cash flow a month. Let's say you annualize that. So you're at 1,000 times 12, which gets you to $12,000, right? Now, there are two main things that you need to account for that are one-time payments. Number one, insurance. Number two, property tax. And so for that, I know, my property taxes, call it for this property, $900 a month. And my insurance is, let's call it $1,000, over a 12-month period. So 900 plus 1,000 gets you to 1,900. Your annual free cash flow, before that is 12K. So let's just say 12K minus, let's just round up to 2K. You're at 10K of net, levered free cash flow a year for a property that you put down, 25% of 65K, that gets you to about, 15K, right?
Mhm.
15K plus 10K of equity of the additional rehab is 25K. So your total, cost basis is 25K. You follow me?
Yeah, I am. I got
You're
my calculator on me right.
yeah, and you are generating, give or take, 10K of free cash flow a year, which means that your payback period is less than 3 years. So what does that mean? It means that after, call it, year 2.5, year three, every dollar that I make on that property, that's just cash. I'm already covered on my cost basis. I've already covered my principal amount, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. That's like almost like a 40% cash and cash return every single year. And
Yes.
for people that are trying to think about like, oh, how do I put my money in the stock market, get like 5 or 10% a year with with some effort here and some creativity and obviously great negotiation skills that Steven has demonstrated, he was able to get 40%.
Yeah.
That's like $10,000 a year. That's not a joke for some people that are out there like looking for financial freedom that might be making like
For
60,
sure.
80, or even $100,000 a year. You only need like 10 of these. And then all of a sudden you get to
Yeah.
step back and just enjoy it and know that you're also helping a needy family that's on low income housing. So
Totally.
I think this just speaks to how profitable affordable housing is, assuming like all the things you bought right, you screened the tenant, you got great property management in place, and you're taking care and addressing any sort of maintenance issues that kind of comes up. This is amazing. Like guys, like this is a real
Yeah.
life-changing money, and it just takes consistency over time to get up to that level so that you can decide what you want to do. Maybe you want to retire early, and this is exactly one way you can do it.
Right.
But thank you for sharing those numbers because I think this gives people a little bit more clarity on what is possible with affordable housing, Stephen. Because sometimes we just talk about the number of doors, but no one ever really goes into the deal as deep as you
Right.
did just now.
Right.
So really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Of course.
Maybe this is the part where we get to some fun questions because as part of this podcast,
Perfect.
right, we try to ask everyone kind of their perspective on why they think affordable housing is so hard to solve for, particularly like the supply of affordable housing. Because
Sure.
I was talking to you, like when I was in affordable housing, waitlist was like 7
Mhm.
years.
Right.
Now in like San Diego, where I live, it's like 12 to 15 years. It's crazy.
Yep.
But for some reason, it's not coming down. The waitlist isn't coming down, and there's still a great lack of supply of affordable housing in the country. So I'm curious, why do you think affordable housing is so hard to solve for? And if there were like one or two things that you think we should be focusing on as generation, what might them be?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm certainly no, um, housing expert by any means, but I'm happy to share anecdotally based on what I have read and learned. I think that there's really a few core issues that need to be resolved, that largely have been unresolved. I think number one is getting the supply of affordable housing up. I think that there are actually not. I know that there are many jurisdictions, cities, municipalities that love the idea of affordable housing and are not supportive of builders building affordable housing in their neighborhood. And so I think you receive a supply constraint because of that reluctance. And that shows in not getting permits and not making these permits in such a way so that it makes sense to the developer. Because the developer needs to make money too, and everyone who comes along with it. And if you're going to impose onerous permits and processes and bureaucracies on this type of process, then people will not be incentivized to increase the supply. So that's number one. I think number two is, and again, this is something that I've experienced as well, is the reluctance of landlords to rent out to Section 8 tenants. It usually comes with increased maintenance. They don't treat the home well or as their own. And um, if they are responsible for a portion of the rent payment, sometimes they are delinquent. And so I think those are some of the reasons that um, make it challenging for some landlords to really um, be motivated to rent out to um, Section 8 tenants. Um, and I think it's an issue that still persists and is not helped by a lot of times um, the housing authorities not willing to pay market rent to the owner of the building. I'm sure there are other parties involved, but those are some of those are the four main ones that come to mind for me. And so, to that end, I think it's important to align, I guess, what I would call aligning incentives, so that everyone is trying to work towards the same thing for similar reasons. Um, I think that's going to be probably the number one issue. Um, and then I would also say I don't think HUD has a funding issue, and I don't think the Section 8 program has a funding issue. It's a
Mhm.
very it's a long-standing program that has received consistent bipartisan support. So it's not an issue of funding. It's an issue of process and of educating local housing authorities about what the market rent looks like, and of improving the process so that they can partner with property managers and owners in a better way. A lot of times, if you do Section 8, you need to get um, extra documentation, you need to go through annual inspections, you need to jump through a lot more holes. And if you don't have a, uh, a partner on the other side, the housing authority, if they are extremely hard to work with, then you're just creating brain damage for lesser rent, which to me doesn't make a lot of sense. So,
No,
anyways, let me
man.
pause there. But those are some of the thoughts that immediately come to mind when I think about affordable housing and some of the issues that still pervade affordable housing.
Yeah, man, I love your response to that question. It was so structured and well thought out, and you laid out a few things that we need to one like just really raise awareness for because there are so many things that it's such a big problem that you almost have to attack it from all angle. And I love your phrase
Right.
of aligning the interests of all the stakeholders because you do need everybody to participate in solving this problem. It's not
For
just
sure.
tax incentives from the government; it's also making the process easier. Because guess what? If you make the process so hard, people are naturally going to shy away from friction in the process. It's
For
kind of like
sure.
the example I use, like, hey, why does Amazon try to get to 2 day shipping? Because they're trying to take away the friction away
Right.
from buying products.
Right.
There needs to be similar sort of best practices that we carry forward to affordable housing that makes
Yep.
the process a lot easier so that it doesn't take forever to get zoning, get permits, and you also don't get the market rents that you're looking for. You can't have it all. You can't make it more difficult and give less money away. And just expect people to do this out of just the kindness of their hearts. There needs to be a little bit more incentive there. So I love all the examples you've given, man, Stephen, and I love that it's based off of your experience in this industry of investing. But like I said, thank you for what you do because without people like you, I would have never had a stable home kind of growing up without affordable housing for my family to grow up in
Yep.
and ultimately for me to grow up as a kid. So thank you for what you do. Stephen, this has been an awesome conversation, man. You given such great tactical advice, so much value packed into this episode, dude. I
Thank
can't
you.
thank you enough. But dude, what's next for you? What if people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you and your investment journey?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to chat. So I think the best way for people to to get in touch would be really through LinkedIn. I'm not super active on social media. I don't have Instagram, but you can find me Stephen Yen, Stephen, and then Yin, Yen on LinkedIn. I think that's the most direct way, and I believe my email is listed on there as well. So if you want to chat through or connect through email, then happy to be in touch that way. Um, I think that property is the most time tested and the most accessible way to create generational wealth for anyone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and put in the work and to be judicious with their money. I think when you look at past examples, whether it's the big developers like Stephen A. Ross or Sam Zell or any of those other names, I think what you find is that a lot of them started off, it's not like they started off with $1 billion of cash in their bank account. That's not that was not their origin. They put in the work early on, and obviously they're now reaping the rewards. That's something that I hope to also do slowly. I think that for the listeners who are listening, I think it's important to start off with one, get it up, running and cash flowing, then two, then three. And I would also say that it's important to be very firm on value when you purchase a property. I would say that again, everything is up for negotiation, so that is especially true for the asking price. And similarly, it's important to be firm with your selling price whenever you decide to exit. Um, don't compromise on, if you have a number in mind to get to the returns that you want to get to, don't compromise on that number. If a number is not reasonable, then that's a different conversation. But if someone is lowballing you as a seller down the road, you need to be firm. And especially it's especially important, I guess, for myself and for you who have partners, friends who are co-investing with you. A lot of times I found myself as sort of the main operator, the main driver of different initiatives on the properties, while others may take a more passive role. So it's the onus is on you to really, I guess, to create value for yourself, for your tenants, for your co-investors. At the end of the day, if your partners, if your friends, if your family, if they are entrusting you with money, their capital, then you as the lead general partner, or the lead limited partner rather, you need to, you have a fiduciary duty to maximize the returns for all your investors. So that's what I would say. That's how I think about it, at least.
I love it, man. You take ownership, you take a responsibility. What a nice little mic drop to end the podcast, man. So, dude, I love it. Thank you so much, Steven. And maybe, hopefully in the future, we can get you back onto the podcast to see where you are in your investment journey.
Sure.
I think that's going to be really fun to kind of hear people and hear about your growth of your portfolio, right? It's kind of amazing, all the things that you've done already so early in your investment career. And I can't wait to kind of hear about your journey.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
For coming. Oh, this has been so fun, man. Thank you again, Steven. Have a great one.
Yep. Thank you.